guy, and luck is a luck.
Hey guys, it's Midnight Philoppicer, and I'm here with a video on how to gut and reassemble an Abloy Disklock Pro without using any special tools, since this lock is different from other Abloys and how it's put together and taken apart. I have another mortise cylinder here to show how to take it apart, and the first thing that you have to do is remove the tailpiece. But with other formats, it will be a little bit different how you actually get to the shell in the back. But once you get to the shell in the back, the next step is to remove a clip, and in order to do that, I recommend finding the center of the clip and pushing it so that it is right up close to the channel at the top. Once it's there, you can go in with a thin tool like a smart key change tool or a flathead screwdriver and pry underneath that clip. And once you pry it out, it will pop out, and so you keep your thumb over part of it so it doesn't come flinging out. Next, you can take your key and you can push sideways on the spinner plate in the front so that the key isn't actually going in and it's pushing the shell out, and you keep your finger over the top so that way this spring-loaded element, which Abloy calls the bat wing in English, doesn't come flinging out. Then you keep your fingers over the spinner plate so that doesn't fall because there's nothing holding that in place. Next, you can put that all down. You can take the copper spacer off the back and the bat wing off, drop the springs out, and you have the sidebar, which Abloy calls the hockey stick in English. And then normally from this point when you're gutting an Abloy, you would just pull the controller out. But if I was to pull the controller out, you'd see the whole disc stack comes out with this lock. So what you can do to prevent that from happening is preload the controller either this way or this way. It doesn't matter which way. But in order to do that, I'm just using the tip of the key. I'm making sure not to insert it too much because it will push those ball bearings into the side and prevent the controller from turning. So just the tip of the key, and I rotate it as far as I can. And you can see the limiter is right up against the edge. So now if I hold the plug upright, I should be able to just simply remove the controller without disturbing any of the discs. Now when the controller is in this state, it's loose and the outer layer can come out, and if that happens, the ball bearings can go shooting out, and so just be careful. Just if that happens, try to save all the parts, and I will show you in a minute here how to put that back together. First, you have a copper spacer disc, and then we have all of our discs. And first thing to note is because we preloaded the controller, both those return bars are biased to one side. So then you're going to take out your disc, and in between each disc we have a spacer. Lay all of those out neatly and in order, and once you do that, I'm just going to move this all off to the side here. You're going to have your nice arrangement here. So the first thing I recommend doing is take a picture so you don't lose track of any parts. Now let's look at reassembling this controller. So first thing to do is we have a ball bearing, spring, ball bearing, and then another ball bearing, spring, ball bearing. So we're going to make some ball bearing sandwiches here. I'm going to put a ball bearing into this slot right there, and then we're going to put a spring, and then we're going to put the other ball bearing over top. Next, I'm going to flip it over, keeping my finger over there so that way it will help me later on. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to put a ball bearing, and then a spring, and then a ball bearing. And so I'm holding the other ball bearing in, and now I'm holding this ball bearing in. And then I'm going to take the outer layer of the shell, and if you look closely at it, one side has two nubs, and one side has that limiter we were looking on before. And on the inside, we have a detent for the ball bearing, and then the same thing on this side. So we're going to try to find the nub on our controller right there. And we want that to be in the open space there. So we're going to flip it around like that. And we're going to actually try to compress it all together, keeping those ball bearings in place. So now we have that centered. And if you rotate it just to the neutral position, you should see feel those ball bearings clip into place like that. So now our controller is reassembled, and those two nubs on the back interact with these two slots in the shell, just to keep in mind for later. Now we'll keep this off to the side for now, and we'll take a look at the shell. First thing we have to do is put the spinner plate in, and with this spinner plate there's actually two sides. There's a flat side and there's a beveled side. So you want the beveled side facing down and the flat side facing up. So that's the beveled side, this is the flat side. So I'm gonna grab it here and put it right into that slot in the back. I want it to be oriented vertical. Normally we want it horizontal with Abloys, but since we're preloading the controller, we want it to be 90 degrees rotated. So that is vertical right there. I'm just gonna put that over here and just show you guys quickly our zero cut disc. So our zero cut disc has a nub right here and then another nub right there. Then these two little gaps here, and then another two gaps, one on this side and one on this side. The last two gaps I pointed to are for the sidebars, and this section here is all for the return bars. These nubs here are what push the return bars. And then in the center of our disc, we have a profile for the key, and then we have a slot in the center, and that is for the controller. So when the controller, if you look on the controller, there's actually two sections where it sticks out a little bit, one right here, and then one a little bit further in. And that's for the first position, and the second one's for the 8th position, because we have two zero cut discs altogether, one in the 8th, and then the one I'm holding right now, which is in the 1st position. So we want the controller to be going in sideways into those discs like that. Okay, so keeping that in mind, we're going to grab our shell and we're going to put our return bars into the shell, and you can see there's two little slots where they want to fit into. And we're gonna put them both beside each other, preloading them in one direction. Then we're gonna take our disc. One other thing to note is there's two sides to the disc. We have a concave side and we have a convex side. So imagine you're eating off of a dish plate, that's how it would look, and that's the way you want to stack it down into the shell, as if you were eating off of a dish plate. Then you can slide that in. I like to hold it at that top gate so my tweezers can slip through that slot there. And you can see that the nub in the back, if I can get the light to shine a little bit better, is pushing those two return bars to the very edge. So that's how it should look. Now from this point forward, there's gonna be a spacer disc in between each actual disc here. So again, I like to grab it at the top so I can slide it through. And then we go to our real discs. And so these discs, you just put in just straight, but same thing, facing upwards so that it looks like you're stacking dish plates. And then you can just go through the lock, one spacer and one disc at a time, and repopulate it. So while I'm doing that, I'll tell you guys a little story about when I first got this lock. It was given to me by a fellow locksmith who challenged me to take it apart. And at the time, I had no idea about how Abloys worked, or let alone Disklock Pros. And they challenged me a couple times, and eventually I worked up the guts to do it. But when I did it, I took pictures along the way, but I couldn't put it back together. I tried probably every possible combination of rearranging the discs and moving the controller and everything that I could think of. Almost mixed up the order there, but once I spent I think about 3 days on it, then I finally got it back together. And I don't know exactly how I did it at the time. This is probably what I did, but I didn't remember how I did it. And so when I was working on this lock again recently, I was going through the same struggles. Just a quick pause to the story here to show that we have our second zero cut disc now in position 8. Get it to focus, and I'm going to do the same thing again where the nub is pushing those two return bars. So slip it through just like that. Okay, and now we're going to continue down the stack and with the story. So when I was taking it apart recently, I had the same problems. I didn't know how to put it back together, so I really tried to work out all the little steps and see what it was that was making it hard. And this is what I found. So hopefully this will help some other people in the future who are struggling with this lock the same way that I did when I first got it. All right, so now we have all of our discs back in the shell. The next step is to get our controller ready. So I'm just going to put the shell over here for a second. Just be careful it's balanced. Now, our two return bars are both biased in this direction, to the right. So it's as if we rotated the controller or the two zero cut discs counterclockwise. So if we want to rotate them back, we need to rotate them clockwise to release them. So we're going to preload our controller, get it to focus, counterclockwise, like this. And then when we put it in and it rotates back, it will rotate those return bars clockwise. So now I'm going to hold the shell here. And remember, I'm just keeping it all tight together because those ball bearings cause it to come apart sometimes. The more that it comes apart, the more loose it becomes. So that's why I don't recommend taking apart the controller if you can help it. Then I put the copper spacer disc in those nubs so that way it doesn't block me later on, and I grip it with my fingers, keeping everything compressed. And then now I just slip the controller right through that profile in the zero cut discs. Sometimes it takes a little bit of finding the perfect sweet spot. And then you should see that those two nubs go perfectly into those notches there. Now, once you have the controller in, you can take your key, in this case it's this one, and rotate it back to neutral. And if you did it correctly, you'll find that when you put the key in, it's not going to get stuck in the 8th position there. It will be able to go in all the way. And when you rotate it, it will show all of the discs are fully in their true gates. So that's how you know you did it properly. And when you pull the key out, don't just pull, because first of all, the whole stack will come out. And also the controller, even if you're holding it from here, the controller will come apart. So you want to actually grip it from the front, and then you can pull it out. Just a little tip when it's still apart. That's one of the common ways that the controller ends up exploding. Now we're going to put our springs in for the bat wing. And the bat wing itself. The sidebar that goes over top of it. Okay, and then from here, I just hold the bat wing with my thumb. And I don't want to compress it too much because then it'll make the sidebar pop upwards, and then that will make it hard for it to go in the shell. But for now, from this point forward, I'm just going to hold it upwards like this. Put the metal spinner disc. Keep in mind there's a concave side that goes facing down. And then I'm going to take my shell, and there's the notch at the top. I want it to line up with the sidebar here. So as I slip it onto the lock like this, I'm just going to kind of wiggle it until I feel that it goes into that sidebar slot. I'm keeping my thumb on the bat wing. I don't want to twist it right now because if I twist, that metal spinner plate will drop. So that's why I'm holding it upright right now. So that way it keeps the metal spinner plate in the correct position. So I'm just pushing with my thumb to get that bat wing to go in. And a lot of times you can just clip it in and it goes in all the way. Now, what you want to do to make sure that it's in all the way is, we'll check it again with the clip in a second. But let's say it's not in all the way and it didn't clip in all the way, so I'm just going to push it out a little bit. I could try to push it in a bit, and then if I feel like it's stuck and it's not going the last little bit, I'm going to take in a flat tool and just push in that bat wing manually, and then it should go in. Okay, now I'm free to spin the lock around and take a look at the back. I'm going to put in the copper spacer and then the clip that goes in underneath it. So I'm just going to lock the clip down on one side like that. So kind of put it in the dent and then put my fingers over it. And then I can use something solid to push on the clip to help encourage it to go downwards and in, make sure it's fully in. And if it feels like it's not clipping in, then that means that the shell is probably not in all the way properly and you might have messed something up along the way. So you want to try to push on the shell here and keeping your finger over the bat wing just to make sure that it is locked in properly. And if it is locked in, then it won't go. So then we can put our tailpiece back on. And then we can test out the key. And if the tailpiece turns, then you did it right. All right, hopefully this helps some other people with gutting this lock, and take care everybody. All the best. Ori,